In today's presentation, I will delve into the intriguing similarities between David Weber and Andreas Resendez's definitions of a frontier. As we navigate through the intricate tapestry of both authors' works, we'll uncover the fascinating parallels that underscore their shared understanding of what constitutes a frontier. To illuminate these shared perspectives, I'll spotlight specific examples of Native interactions with Mormon pioneers, white American ranchers, and the Pueblo Revolt, all meticulously documented in Resendez's groundbreaking book, The Other Slavery. These examples align closely with Weber's definition from his seminal work, The Spanish Frontier in North America. Weber eloquently defines a frontier as, quote, zones where the culture of the invader and the invaded contend with one another and with their physical environment to produce a dynamic that is unique to times and place, end quote. This eloquent depiction encapsulates the essence of frontier dynamics, emphasizing the clash of cultures and the transformative nature of these encounters. Resendez echoes and expands upon this notion in his meticulous exploration of the relationships between native people and the colonizers. He meticulously dissects the power dynamics and exploitation inherent in these interactions, painting a vivid picture of the complexities of frontier life. Let's start with the interactions between Mormon pioneers and Native Americans in Utah. Resendez paints a vivid portrait of these interactions, revealing a landscape fraught with exploitation and coercion. Weber's framework of frontiers as zones of cultural contention becomes palpably evident as we witness the clashes between the invaded Native Americans and the invading Mormons. The Mormon pioneers, driven by a fervent belief in their divine mission to redeem the native peoples, embarked on a quest to convert them to the Mormon faith. In Chapter 11 of The Other Slavery, Resendez quotes Brigham Young, who expresses that belief, saying, quote, "The Lord could not have devised a better plan than to have put the saints where they were to help bring about the redemption of the Lamanites, and also make them a white and delightsome people." End quote. This deeply ingrained belief not only justified but also propelled the Mormon Church and its followers into the realm of Native American trafficking, perpetuating a cycle of exploitation and subjugation. However, the exploitation of Native Americans extended far beyond the confines of Mormon settlements. Resendez also shines a light on the practices of American ranchers, who capitalized on the culture of the frontier to serve their own interests. In Chapter 10 of The Other Slavery, he reveals that while some merely tolerated slavery in the West, others fully embraced and participated in it. He specifically uses the example of Don Guadalupe Viejo, saying, quote, "One of the first things visitors noticed about the Viejo's home was the ubiquitous crews of servants. In her custom reminiscent of the antebellum South, each of Don Guadalupe's children, boys and girls, had a dedicated Indian servant. This was not the only instance of American ranchers utilizing slave labor. The Indian slave trade grew significantly as the population in California grew. As the slave trade in the West grew, so did Indians' submissiveness. In this case, we see the desires of the invaders, or the ranchers, contending with the desires of the invaded, or Native Americans." Finally, perhaps the most significant event in Resendez's analysis is the Pueblo Revolt. This interaction between the natives and the colonizers is perhaps one of the few instances where Resendez showcases indigenous resistance in such an overt way. The Pueblo Revolt in the late 17th century epitomizes indigenous resistance against Spanish colonization in the Americas. The uprising exemplifies Weber's definition of frontiers as zones of cultural contention where the invaded resist the invader's exploitation. So what about their interactions drove the Pueblo people in the thousands to attack their invaders? Resendez gives an explanation of the insurrection in Chapter 6 of his book. He quotes Hubert Howie Bancroft's perspective of the Pueblos, saying, quote, they seem to have been more strongly attached than most American tribes to their Aboriginal faith, and they had secretly continued so far as possible the practice of the old forms of worship. So perhaps the Pueblo could see the effect that the invaders were having on their culture and feared how the Spaniards would go too far to impose their beliefs. According to the colonizers' perspectives, the attack was the result of inspiration from the devil. Resendez quotes a priest in Durango saying that the Indians, quote, are subjects to the influences of shamans, of the devil, who incite their listeners to rebellion and commit atrocities, end quote. Once again, we see the invaders using the justification of savagery as a result of a lack of Christianity in order to justify their gross behavior, just as we saw in Utah with the Mormons. In every one of these instances, the frontier was a stage for conflict between the invaders and the invaded. Despite the nuanced differences, both Weber and Resendez's views on the frontiers are incredibly similar. Their definitions highlight the clash of cultures and the power dynamics between colonizers and the colonized. Resendez's examples from the other slavery provide compelling evidence of this alignment. In Utah, the clash between the Mormons and the natives exemplifies the exploitation of native people. Further west, the ranchers show the frontier as a space where the invaders could capitalize on their culture in order to meet their own interests. And the Pueblo Revolt shows the dynamic of resistance and the contention between the two cultures. In conclusion, the evidence from Resendez's book, The Other Slavery, supports the argument that Weber and Resendez's perspectives on the frontiers are indeed very similar. Their focus on power dynamics, exploitation, and cultural encounters underscores the shared understanding of frontier dynamics.